And now, our feature presentation.
Welcome to the Allan Handelman Show.
A man of fight.
Your window to rock and roll.
They're from some planet other than our own.
Alien sightings.
This fascinating phenomenon.
Paranormal activity. Declassified data.
Are you telling us absolutely everything? Absolutely everything?
Music, comedy, pop culture, sex.
Don't you dare touch me!
How well can you drive?
Drugs.
Hopped up with marijuana.
And always, the most interesting people in the world.
I am just a figment of your imagination.
You never really know what's going to be happening during the next 3 hours, but we guarantee you a show people will be talking about tomorrow.
Be quiet and pay attention!
Now, here's Allan.
I am so glad you're here. It's going to be a 3-hour packed show. Great stuff. Starting off with investigative journalist Greg Palast. It's great to have him back. He's the nonpartisan scourge on the 1% of both parties who would take away our rights and our treasury. His latest book is called Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, How to Steal an Election in 9 Easy Steps. Greg, it is great to have you back on the show.
Alan, fantastic to be back.
Where to start? Give us, before we get into the details, give us an overall introduction. I can't wait to devour this book.
Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. Well, I would start with the comic book in the middle by Ted Rall. We have a 50-page comic book in the middle, and then you can get to the tragic comedy of American politics. So it's Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. It's just that. It's about those billionaire bad boys who would steal this election, and why. They're not Democrats or Republicans so much as they are out there for themselves. They have, for example, super PACs called Restore Our Future, and they mean their future as billionaires. And then the 9 easy steps for stealing an election, the subtitle. Well, that's just how they're going to do it and how they've been doing it. And now that they can legally put in billions, they're seeing if they can illegally muck with your vote.
Yeah. Just for people who may not know the name, it was Greg who in 2000 exposed Katherine Harris, who removed thousands of innocent black citizens from the voters' rolls as felons and changed the election in favor of George Bush. And he's been on top of it. He's like he said, it's both sides. He's kind of an independent guy. He can't pigeonhole and say, "Oh, he must be against Republicans. He's a Democrat." No, he's looking after the bad guys. I'd like to start, just to talk about how things have changed since the Katherine Harris days, and where we are today on how they manipulate the votes and their plan from voter ID. Give us a whole, because I think people now are just hearing about the voter ID movement and the
there's 9 ways. In fact, going back, you said how are things since Katherine Harris' day? Well, worse.
Worse.
She was an amateur. I mean, she removed thousands of black folk from the voter rolls. It's called purging. It's one of the 9 ways: purging, caging, prestidigitizing, tossing, etc. It was one of the 9 ways. Of course, removing felons, people can't vote from the voter rolls, okay, except that these people's only crime was voting while black. Now, since then, the game has gotten much more sophisticated. First of all, we've got super PACs and PACs and actually charity organizations, because that's the new thing, is that technically groups that are charities under the IRS can give unlimited sums with secret donors. And two groups are not so secret. One is Karl Rove, who has a group called Crossroads, and it was Rove. Rove has a data mining computer system called Data Trust, if you trust that. And then there is another group headed by the Koch brothers, and they have a data mining system, set of computers, called Themis. And if you put Data Trust and Themis together, you've got a computer database which has more information on you than the FBI, or at least the FBI is supposed to have on. And they'll be using that to help their buck buddies win elections. Now, I don't mind if they use it to figure out, well, okay, you get nose clippers, and so we're going to send you a special nose clippers for Paul Ryan sticker or something. I don't care. They can spend their money on convincing you. It's the fact that they use these systems to figure out how to take away votes and get them thrown in the garbage. That's my big problem.
Wow. This is getting, as I said, even though we've been talking about this for a couple of years as far as this movement to have photo ID, Democrats feel this is definitely a way of suppressing the vote. That's the only reason. There's almost no cases of voter fraud, very, very few, if any. So for people who are just now, since the conventions, who are finally tuning in, give them an overall look at what's going on behind the scenes. Why?
Well, here's the ugly part, which is that about 5.9 million votes were cast and not counted in 2008. About 2.7 ballots just tossed the garbage for all kinds of weird technical reasons, not because these are good voters or good ballots. And then about 3 million people taken removed from the voter rolls or told you can't vote for all kinds of, again, cockamamie reasons. And by the way, this ID stuff, just so we know what's going on here.
Right.
I have a section, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, a chapter called Nuns on the Run. In Indiana, 10 nuns went to a polling place that they voted at for decades, and they were told, scram, sisters, you can't vote here because you don't have the photo IDs you're supposed to have. Now, with basically a driver's license. Now, these 10 nuns ran from age, the young ones were 88 years old and went up to 98, I guess it was. And so they didn't have, I'm happy to say, their driver's licenses. So they lost their right to vote. Now, you'd say, okay, well, but that's to prevent voter fraud. And voter fraud, the reason you need an ID is a particular type, it's identity theft voter fraud. I go in and I say, listen, I'm Allan Handelman. I'm going to vote for Allan. In 100 years of keeping track of frauds in Indiana, 100 years, there hasn't been a single case, not one in 100 years, of someone stealing someone else's identity to vote. So then what's this all about? Well, as you say, the problem is that we know who's not getting IDs. And it's poorer people, it's working class people who don't have passports because they didn't just come back from their ski trip in the Alps. And while, yes, it has very much a racial character because poor people are people of color in the United States for the most part, it's a kind of class thing. I mean, Obama and Vernon Jordan, for example, Vernon Jordan is for a voter ID, but he's got his passport, he's got his country club card, he's got his chauffeur to vouch for him. He doesn't have a voter ID problem. So he doesn't worry, and he's black. They don't say you're black, you can't vote. It is about, basically, vote theft is kind of a class war by other means. There's a real discomfort in the ruling class of America, the 1%, about letting everyone else in on the voting, where your vote counts as much as a billionaire's, and they got to make sure that therefore your vote doesn't count at all. That's what it comes down to.
And it's also the young, because maybe a college ID, they don't accept college IDs, so that makes it hard for people who are more likely to vote Democrat, and the elderly.
Yeah, and so again, if in the case of like students, for example, one of the games, by the way, is called caging. And this is one of the ways they use the database. They send a letter to your house, first class. Yeah. And in case of students, they sent out letters. Karl Rove, who Bush called after a flower, he called him Turd Blossom. And so little Mr. Blossom sent out letters to thousands of students. And when the letters came back, undeliverable, because he said, do not forward, he said, aha, fraudulent voting address. Of course, it's August when the letters went to students. Now, that doesn't mean you're a student, you're allowed to vote come November if you have a legal address, but if you're away for summer vacation and you have a forward, that doesn't mean you're an illegal voter. And what was really sick about it was that thousands of these letters went to the Jacksonville Naval Air Station, to voters living on the base at the Jacksonville Naval Air Station who lived on the base, so you're talking soldiers here, and they weren't at home. They weren't at the naval base when the letter arrived. They got their votes challenged. Now, you tell me, Alan, why wouldn't a soldier be at their U.S. registration address?
They're on the move. They could be anywhere in the world.
From Iraq to Afghanistan. So, and when they would vote, you had Florida soldiers at the Naval Air Station mail in their ballots, which is quite legal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, geez, you're taking a bullet, you can mail in a ballot. So they mail in their ballot, and those ballots were challenged. They didn't even know it, and their votes were lost. So that was a Karl Rove special. I know that the Republicans make a big deal that the Democrats are out to knock out the military vote. Well, it depends whom and where. I mean, again, this is about, your grunt is not going to be their voter, and they don't want those votes. So they challenge those soldier votes. So that's a dumb trick. And by the way, in that case, it's illegal. I mean, it's one thing to play games with. You can't, you don't have the right ID. You can kick a nun out of a voting booth for improper ID. The Supreme Court says that's perfectly legal. What's not legal is sending a letter to a soldier or a student knowing that they're not going to answer it and then using that to claim that they're fraudulent voters.
Right.
That's a attack on civil rights. That's a go to jail crime, and yet these guys, they get away with it.
Well, they think because they figure, well, we'll just act like we didn't know in August they weren't there, and there was an oversight or one of these excuses. Once the election is over, it's over. You can't change it. I mean,
that's right. And what happens is also, even when you catch these guys, it's always, oops, there's a mistake. Gee, we're sorry. Just like Katherine Harris wrote letters to all these thousands of innocent voters saying, I'm so sorry you couldn't vote. But then they're back at it again. I'll tell you something. Like, for example, if you look at Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, and some of this stuff is, by the way, obviously there's a comic book inside. I mean, it's a serious topic, but I have to do it with a little humor. But some of it, like, for example, a woman, Bobby Moore, B-O-B-B-I, so a woman. I know it's a woman because it says F next to her name.
Mm-hmm.
She lost her vote because a guy, M next to his name, named Robert Moore, was convicted of a crime in Ohio. Now, so Robert Moore knocks out the vote of a guy, knocks out the vote of Bobby Moore, because they have an algorithm to try to hunt down those people who've sneakily varied their name from, Robert to Bobby, except that one is female, one is male. And by the way, Robert was convicted of his crime in the year 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's, Minority Report here. This is the game that's played, but who catches this stuff? People show up at the voting booth at a polling station, their name's knocked off for all kinds of reasons. You're a felon. You're an inactive voter, a new weird category, all kinds of stuff. And they just think, well, some weird glitch that just affects me, without realizing that there's some evil little snit with soft hands and a tiny mind who is sitting there trying to knock out thousands of people like you. And, there's ways, by the way, that you can protect yourself.
This is investigative journalist Greg Palast. His latest book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, How to Steal an Election in 9 Easy Steps. How to Steal an Election in 9 Easy Steps. Great website for the book, too, ballot-bending.org.
Yes.
As we continue on this, now it's interesting, some of the bullet points and things that you cover. Romney's top donors made $2.4 billion on a scam involving the auto bailout. Explain that, the details.
Yeah, you got a problem? You don't celebrate success, Alan?
Yeah.
Actually, I think that what they mean when Romney says we celebrate success, I think he means we celebrate loads of money. I shouldn't laugh about it because it was really, the American public got taken down big time. Couple of his donors, one, Paul the Vulture Singer. The Vulture, by the way, I didn't give him that name. And John the Snake Paulson. Again, I didn't give him that name, the Snake. That's from his bankers who are appreciative of their charming methods. So Vulture and Snake got together and they bought up General Motors Parts Company, Delco, which had become Delphi, which was in bankruptcy. They bought it for 67 cents a share. And then they turned around and sold it for $22 a share. Now, you might say, gee, these are smart guys. They took a company worth nothing, peanuts, 22 cents a share, and they make a 3,000% profit. Vulture made just short of $1 billion, and Snake made $1.5 billion, almost to the penny. How? It's how they did it. It's not that they made the money. I'll celebrate their success.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is
Sure.
that they're celebrating with my money. And what happened was that 100% of that money, 100%, comes from TARP and the auto bailout funds, all of it. So that what they did was they went in to the auto czar, Obama's confused guy that was supposed to bail out the auto industry.
Right.
And the auto czar, they told the auto czar, okay, he had cut a deal already with General Motors to buy back their old parts company because they needed the parts, obviously. And they had a deal, and they said, okay, well, we'll buy back your shares. I know you got your 67 cents, so what we'll do is we'll give you $1. A nice, for a few months, you just made a lot of money. They'd make like $100 million for a few weeks of their trouble. And then the Snake and the and Vulture Singer turned around and said, and this is a quote from their guys, this is a quote. They said, if you don't give us what we want, we will shut you down. We will shut you down, because they have all the parts. They literally had the government and General Motors by the ball bearings. Literally. They had they're the only guys that made steering columns in the United States for all the companies. And they didn't mean just General Motors. They're going to take down everyone. So Chrysler, which is in crisis, maybe had a few weeks to operate. And they asked, so the auto czar turned to the General Motors executives and said, how long can you go last without these guys? Tell them to go to hell. And GM said, a couple hours. We're done. We're finished. We're out of business. We're gone. So they got what they wanted. The government ponied up $12 billion for these guys.
And Romney was aware of this. It wasn't like something he delegated to somebody else to take care of it. And was he actively on top of this?
I have to tell you, at first, I didn't think so. I figured, okay, he should know who these guys are, because you don't get a name like the Vulture. And by the way, since that's his top donor, and Fortune says he's the guy, he's the most important donor to Romney. He started the super PAC. And by the way, he's the guy that told Romney to put Paul Ryan on the ticket, okay? So Romney has to know who these guys are and know why he's called the Vulture. Everyone knows who this guy is. If this is Bain Capital. He's not a peanut farmer like Jimmy Carter or something. This is his business. And in fact, I should just say that Singer just paid almost just short of $1 billion from a company bought a company owned by Bain. So Bain obviously knows these guys well. And certainly he knows his big donor. So it is inconceivable that Romney didn't know where his big donor's money come from. Now, Vulture gave him $1 million. Snake gave him $1 million. These are the first $1 million donations given to these super PACs, and set it all up. And now they're giving millions more. So that Romney knows that this is all bailout money, all TARP money. And if you're wondering why, everyone says, how could Paul Ryan have voted for TARP? I mean, isn't he the Tea Party teabag? And the answer is because his number one donor by far is Vulture Singer, and that's where Singer needed that money, needed his vote in October of 2008. Bush was still president, remember, when Ryan voted for the bailout after screaming bloody murder in public. He was very public, gave big speeches against TARP and the bailout, and then voted for both. He says, I was trying to save the plants in my community, which he didn't. But he did get the big money from the Vulture.
Stay tuned for more of The Allan Handelman Show.